thing here, but nobody's any better at this than you are.
That's fine. Take a deep breath.
Give them hell at the end. Good luck to you.
Fight like hell like we do every week. You are the best here. Brett, be affirmative. You told me to get on.
Info. Ready. Ready. Go slow. Green, green, green. Lock it down, lock it down. 14.
I'm destroyed, and I just got drove through like 6 times on the 14th. What the f*** is he thinking? That is the stupidest thing I've seen in my career. Literally.
Everything you described is accurate. Haven't even finished the second stage yet. Half the field's wrecked.
Hell yeah.
11 got it. Rowdy there, Matt. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day. Great work, my man. Great work.
Keep putting yourself in position. We'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
10-4. Great job, guys.
And welcome back to Racing in the Draft. My name is Mark. Thanks for showing up again for a Saturday night of Draftkings, NASCAR, and all the fun that goes along with it. I don't know about anybody else, but I was quite entertained all day today with the Truck Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway and followed up by the Xfinity race. Quite entertaining. It once again showed why this reconfiguration of Atlanta has turned out to be quite a blessing in disguise. Wasn't real sure when they first did it, but it has put on a whale of a race every time they race at it. So super excited to see what we get tomorrow, because the last 2 races today were phenomenal, and all indications are when they've put on that type of show in the Xfinity and Truck Series that the Cup Series typically also tends to be really good. If you're just coming in, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and follow along each week. We're here most Saturday nights around 9 o'clock or after the Xfinity race, if the Xfinity race happens to go a little bit longer on a Saturday night. But we'll be here most Saturday evenings. And if they happen to have a late Sunday race, like the Coke 600 runs late, we'll do probably like noon on a Sunday or something like that. But I'll always try to post something in the community tab on the YouTube page, and also try to do something on Twitter/X. So appreciate you tuning in. Let's get to it. Let's go back to last week's race at Daytona, where William Byron back-to-back wins for the 24, the youngest driver to ever have back-to-back wins at Daytona for the 500 race in the opening race of the season. So congratulations to William Byron for pulling that off at such a young age, upsetting the other guy who used to drive the 24. Brian Walker, what's up, buddy? How we doing? How's your Saturday? Are we ready for a 400-miler at Atlanta tomorrow? And will we get a 3-wide finish at the line? I'll be excited if we have a finish like we had in the Truck Series, which was, pretty much a photo finish. So, all things are lining up for this to be a great race, but maybe predictable. In this spring race last year at Atlanta, we had Kyle Busch win the truck race. We had Austin Dillon win the Xfinity race. Will we get a Joey Logano win, or will we find somebody different? Hopefully, maybe out of the Penske camp, because the Penske guys look really fast. But Daytona 500, congratulations to William Byron on winning that from 9th place coming out of turn 2 to leading the most important lap and the only lap that he led the entire night. And he did not even make the optimal lineup. Not surprising, because it's Daytona, and he started in 5th place, and then he only had, I guess he did lead 10 laps, it says, but only 1 fast lap. So he was 8th on the scoring pylon for Draftkings points, but it pretty much turned out exactly the way we thought. Nobody in the top 10, nobody in the top 15 made the optimal lineup. Jimmy Johnson, Alex Bowman, Daniel Suarez were pretty much the obvious three, and they were also all owned like 40%. So not surprising there that they all made the optimal lineup. All they had to do was survive, and they did do that. John Hunter Nemechek with another good run. That was our sleepy pick. Even though if you looked at his stats at Daytona, he's not that much of a sleeper. He just happens to always find his way to the finish. Ryan Blaney, I mean, just the Penske cars on these super speedways are just phenomenal. Michael McDowell, as always, does an amazing job at these super speedways and came in 11th and rounded out the end of the optimal lineups. But, you know, I mean, we still had Chase Briscoe make it into the top 15 in points. Just Austin Cindric made it into the top 15 in points, and William Byron, the race winner, making it into the top 15. So it wasn't completely out of some of the winning lineups to have some of the guys that started in the top 10, but your optimal lineup did turn out to not have anybody in the top 15. And of course, these same 6 make up our 6 drivers for our 2025 optimal lineup challenge I do every year. We'll keep track of this every week and see who seems to be trending on the optimal side. Okay, let's head to Atlanta for the Amber Health 400. Atlanta has got reconfigured just a little over 3 years ago. It's 3 years to this weekend was the first race after the reconfiguration, which made it kind of a super speedway, and we can still throw it as an intermediate track because it's only 1.54 miles in length, 28 degrees in the turns, 5 degrees on the straightaways. The race length is 260 laps, so 60 laps more than what we saw last week at Daytona. Dominator points will be 182, coming from 65 points of laps led and 117 points from fast laps. Dominator points are not going to be something overly concerning. They will be something that we need to look at a little bit more than we did at Daytona, but because the fast laps are still spread out throughout the field, because it is still a drafting style track, you'll have somebody in 22nd, 23rd, 24th, whatever, that'll draft up and suck up to somebody's back end on a particular lap, and they will have a faster lap than the first and second place guys if they're running side by side. So your fast laps still get spread out. Looking back at the last 6 races at Atlanta with this new configuration and the new next-gen era, we had the most fast laps run in a race for any one driver was 16. So, and that's where your bulk of your points come from, because it's 0.45 Draftkings points per fast lap that you acquire. And it's only 0.25, a quarter of a point per lap led. So even if, let's say, Ryan Blaney, who has the pole, goes out and leads 260 laps, he's going to get 65 points. Now, that's going to be pretty impressive, but, and very, very doubtful. I think the most we've seen here was Joey Logano, I think in the spring of last year. No, 2 years ago? We'll look. But at one point, Joey Logano led 140 laps. Did not win the race, but did end up... No, he did win the race. I don't know. Let's just pull it up. Let's see. Where? That's the Daniel Suarez, Joey Logano, 9 laps led. Here it is. The spring of 2023, he started first, finished first, had 140 laps led, and only had 9 fast laps. 260 laps total. He did have 84.5. So it does happen. We can also look at this other fun chart that I like so much, which is the top 15 in Draftkings points and where they started and where they finished. And these little green indicators show if they started from the pole or on the front row. Joey Logano in the 2023, like we just discussed, had 84.05, which is the most points ever scored in the next-gen era. In the fall of 2022, Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain both started first and second, so they started from the front row. And then we can go back and look at the fall of 2022. Chase Elliott led 96 laps, Ross Chastain led 32 laps, but their fast laps were spread out. And as you can see, this line here, this fast lap line, it's spread out throughout the entire field. So something to definitely keep in mind as we start to go through all of this. Track comparisons, I mean, because it is a drafting style track, Super Speedway in a hybrid form, because it's only 1.5 miles in length, so it's a little smaller than the Super Speedways, but very, very draft dependent. You can compare Daytona and Talladega when looking at your Daytona lineups. Optimal lineups from the past, we kind of had a pretty good indication by looking at that chart I just showed on who made the optimal lineups. And as we can see, we're not fully dependent on taking people starting outside of the top 10. We have a 5th place and a 7th place with Austin Cindric and Joey Logano from the fall race last year. And even Austin Cindric lost 5 spots, which is quite miraculous, but he led 92 laps and had 5 fast laps and still ended up with 54.25 points, enough to make the optimal lineup. And then the spring of 2024, so a year ago, we had Ryan Blaney and Austin Cindric. I see a pattern here. Both starting with inside the top 10. So we're not fully pulling people out of the top 10 like we would normally do at Daytona and Talladega. Number one is because we have more laps. You have more opportunities to have dominator points that will and can come into play when we're building our lineups. So we're not necessarily taking people out that are starting in the top 10. The fall of 2023, nobody started in the top 17. And then in the spring of 2023, the one we discussed with Joey Logano, who started from the pole, finished first and led 140 laps. And we also had Brad Keselowski, who started 4th and finished 2nd and led 47 laps in that race. So we're not fully pulling everyone out from the top 10, as I stated earlier. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're looking. Here's our place differential chart, which is probably really impossible to see unless you've got a really, really big screen. But this just kind of shows if you start in first, finish in first, you get 45 points. If you start in 10th and finish in first, you get 54 points. So that kind of gives you what type of points you get from starting spot to finishing spot. With all that being said, here's a much more condensed version of the top 15 in points and where the averages kind of come from. And when we look at it, we have 1.8 drivers who make the top 15 in points. This is not necessarily the optimal, but it's a top 15. And typically, if you can get most of your drivers within the top 15 in points, typically you're going to at least win a little bit of money in PPG tournaments. So the high-end tournaments. So this kind of gives you an indication of where we need to draw from. And still, because it's a place differential, 21st through 30th still seems to be the bulk of the area that we're looking for. So it's still very much a place differential race when we're building our lineups, but we don't necessarily have to or need to pull the people starting in the top 10 out. This is our practice sheet, but there was no practice this weekend, so this is not filled in. We will see this come into play next week when we head to Circuits of the America, or COTA, as it is called. All right, let's get into our driver-by-driver breakdown and kind of really see where some of our drivers are starting and what trends and what they've done recently at Atlanta, so we can kind of begin to think about how we build our lineups. And this one's going to be... This is going to be an interesting race to build lineups for, because you've got 3 distinct manufacturer differences. You have the Fords, who are extremely fast in qualifying. Really, only one Chevy made the top 10, and that was Kyle Busch. Everybody else was driving a Ford. The Toyotas were just awful in qualifying, and as we'll see when we get to Denny Hamlin, who is starting, I think, 37th, so 2 spots from last, and that's typically not where Denny Hamlin would be. And then you've got the Chevys in the Hendrick camp that are kind of stuck right in the middle, somewhere between like 12th and 20th. So we've got this distinct. Fords were super fast, the Chevys were okay, and then the Toyotas that just missed their qualifying setup. Now, when I was watching qualifying, Denny Hamlin was like, no, we're not. I don't think we're going to be fast. I just hope we're not too slow. Well, I think he was slower than he was hoping they would be. So they're definitely going to have to figure a few things out and make some adjustments to that car as the race goes. Luckily enough, it's 260 laps. There's plenty of laps to make the adjustments that they need to make the Toyotas better. And because this is a place differential track for DraftKings, more than likely the Toyotas are going to be extremely heavily owned. So when you're building your lineups, if you're looking to be contrarian, not putting Toyotas in may be the way to go. But I think we're going to need to have a small handful of Toyotas in that grouping. All right, William Byron, our Daytona 500 back-to-back winner from last week. $10,000, most expensive player on the board. He is starting in 16th, so kind of right in the middle. And we don't have any practice data, so we don't know what that indicates. And that makes this a little bit more of a crapshoot, but we do know what they do normally in the way of finishing positions at Atlanta. William Byron does have a win here. He did win the, I guess, inaugural race of the new configuration back in the spring of 2022. He's got that one win, which gave him the top 5. He's got 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s, a 24.9 DraftKings average, and a 17.8 average finish. He finished 9th here in the fall race last year. And all this is indicated up here. And the total Atlanta history, this includes before the reconfiguration to the reconfiguration. He's got 11 total starts, 2 wins, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s, 8 top 20s, 18.1 at an average finish. I then rank him based on trend lines, which is the last 10 races, including the last 9 from last year, to like style tracks. So what he's done at Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta, and what he's done over the last 5 or 6 races here at Atlanta, and his starting position, and compile all that together, and I come up with a rank of 10th out of the 39 drivers. So William Byron coming in for a rank of 10th. I may not cover the ranking on every driver except for the ones that I particularly like or particularly dislike, but that is up here in this corner. So we will skim through most of these other drivers as we go through, and as we go through, we'll kind of play the game that we played last week, which is on this point sheet, where we can look at starting positions, fast laps, laps led, and how many points that would give somebody. So if anybody's got any questions about, oh, I really want to take Denny Hamlin, who's starting in 37th, if he finishes in 10th place, has 10 fast laps. Now, I have to put 1 lap led in because I didn't put a 0. How many points does that get him? He gets him 65.75 points. Well, if Joey Logano goes out, Ryan Blaney goes out, leads from the pole, finishes in first, has 14 fast laps and leads 100 laps, that gives him 76.3. Well, you can see 37th to 10th still gets him pretty close. I guarantee both of these would be in the optimal lineup if it fit. So we can always go back and refer to this sheet as we go through and look at these drivers. So we can kind of look here. If William Byron, we think, we'll just kind of play with him. He's starting in 16th. I did add a bunch of numbers to this. 16th. Oh, can I just put that in? 16th. Nope, that doesn't work. What does work? All right. Hold on. We gotta play with this. Why isn't there a 16th? 6, 7. I'll just drag this down. That should do it. Can we go to 16 now? Yes. All right, let's hide this back. Sorry, on the fly. All right, if he starts in 16th, let's say he gets up to 3rd. Where's 3? And he has 11 fast laps and he leads 10 laps. Well, that gives him 61.45 points. Well, if we go back and look at our optimal lineups back here, well, 69 through 55, 84 through 52, 74 through 50, 71 through 50. So somewhere just north of 50 points, DraftKings points, should get you pretty close to the optimal lineup. So hopefully that kind of gives a decent diagram of kind of what we're looking for and what place differential does when it comes to not having true dominators in a race or enough laps to have true dominators. We could easily see a dominator tomorrow. So it's not out of the question. That's why we're not taking the guys like Ryan Blaney out of the mix, because when we look at Ryan Blaney's numbers, he's $9,800 in DraftKings, but the last 5 races at Atlanta, he's finished in the top 5 all 5 races. He has a 5.2 average finish. Phenomenal. He's got all 5 races he's finished in the top 10. 3 of those he's finished in the top 5. And doesn't have a win. He finished 3rd here in the fall race last year. Out of the 13 total starts at Atlanta, including both configurations, he's got 13 starts, 1 win, 6 top 5s, 8 top 10s, 11 top 20s. Ryan Blaney is extremely good at Atlanta, and especially with the new reconfiguration. Penske, as a whole, the Fords as a whole, are very good at this configuration. So, am I taking Ryan Blaney out of my lineups? I mean, I'm going to run him, but I will probably only have him if I run 100 lineups, and I don't run 100 lineups, I run about 80 lineups. I would probably have him in 10 to 12 lineups. And a lot of those lineups, I'm probably going to put him with some of the other Fords, because this is still a draft-dependent track, and typically the Fords are going to team up together, the Chevys will team up together, and the Toyotas will team up together. Now that makes it also very interesting for this race, because all the Fords are starting up front, all the Chevys are kind of in the middle, and the Toyotas are all in the back. So they're all going to be kind of together to start this race, which last week at Daytona, manufacturers were spread out through the entire field. But I definitely will have some Ryan Blaney. I won't have a ton, because this is not like a Kyle Larson at Las Vegas, or Kyle Larson at Las Vegas is just phenomenal. He, on average, will lead out of the 273 laps that they run. He'll typically lead 200 and some of those laps. And because it's not a draft-dependent track, he'll also have that many fast laps, because typically the leader's the fastest driver. So it's complete domination. So that's the difference between a Las Vegas that's 1.5 miles, or Kansas that's 1.5 miles, compared to an Atlanta that's 1.5 miles. It's not draft dependent at those other tracks like it is at Atlanta. But either way, Ryan Blaney, definitely, I'm not taking him out of my lineups. I'm not going to run him like I would a Kyle Larson at Kansas or at Vegas, but I'm still going to have at least some ownership share of Ryan Blaney. Like I said, probably about 10%. Joey Logano also in that same boat. At $9,700, he's starting in 4th. We have to include the 21 car for Josh Berry in the mix with the Penskes, because it's kind of a sister team. The cars are set up pretty much by Penske, but it's owned by the Wood brothers. But either way, all 4 of them are starting 1, 2, 3, 4. Joey Logano just happened to miss on his qualifying and ended up in 4th. But Joey Logano has 2 wins, 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s, and a 14.6 average finish at Atlanta for the last 5 races. And he finished first in the fall race last year. 22 total starts. So until this new reconfiguration, he had not won at Atlanta. But he does have a 13.0 average finish. He's always run pretty well here. Compared to Ryan Blaney with a 12.1 or 5.2, Ryan Blaney seems to be a little bit more of a consistent pick, but Joey Logano has shown that he has the tendency to dominate. Chase Elliott, next on our list here, starting in 19th, does have 1 win here over the last 5 races. He's got a 9.3 average finish. He finished 8th in the spring, and starting in 19th, he's starting back there with the rest of the Chevys. They could easily team up together and draft really well with each other, which could give them fast laps and those types of things. Decent amount of place differential starting in the middle of the field. You're also starting in the middle of the muck. But I don't think these guys are going to do anything real screwy at the beginning. This is going to be probably a fairly boring race, unless we have some type of tire issue, for the first 2 stages. Now, of course, the last 2 laps of each stage will always be a little bit more exciting because they're shooting for some points that they get for top 10s. But even then, I mean, they'll go hard, but they won't go like they would for the last end of the race. Once we get to stage 3, the gloves are off at that point. The Chevys are all going to team up together. They're going to try to pass the Fords. The Toyotas are going to do the same thing. And that's when we start to get into calamity. But because of the potential place differential upside with Chase Elliott, he comes in ranked 2nd. Brad Keselowski, 9,300, driving the Ford RFK car, starting in 9th, has a 15.6 average finish. He's got 4 top 20s in the last 5 races here. He finished 19th here in the fall race last year. He does have 2 wins on the previous layout of this track. Doesn't have a win in the new configuration. I don't mind having some Brad Keselowski. He has shown that he does know how to lead here. His finishes don't shine as much as I would like for them to, but because there's now 3 RFK cars in the field, I could see the 3 of them teaming up and being pretty good with each other. So I'm not, I think I would probably have more Ryan Blaney than I'll have Brad Keselowski. So when I say, I'll probably have him in 4 to 6 lineups, which would put him somewhere between 5 and 8% of my lineups. I'm not going to be super heavy on Brad. There's too much risk without as much reward with the place differential, and I don't think he will have a chance to lead a whole lot of laps. Denny Hamlin, this is nothing but a place differential play, and he's going to be extremely heavily owned. I would probably expect him to be over 50% owned, to be perfectly honest. So I think this is really good potential to fade. Denny has also, he's not been super great at the new configuration at Atlanta, as we could see in the last 5 races. No top 5s, only 1 top 10 out of the 5 starts, and an 18.4 average finish. So not great. But if he gets from 37th to 18th, let's go to our handy dandy chart here. Starts in 37th, and what did I say his average finish was? 18th. And he leads, let's say, just leads 1 lap, because that's I have to. And he's got 11 fast laps. Well, that's 61.2 points. Well, as we know, anything over 50 to 52 points probably puts him in the optimal lineup. So if Denny Hamlin can just go get his average finish, that puts him in real contention to be in the optimal lineup. So that's why I kind of like to have that chart available, because it kind of shows what the place differential possibility is, even with the lack of any real dominator points. And because he's starting so far back, he can have the opportunity to run much faster laps. And Denny's also really smart because they have the new Xfinity fastest lap of the race, 1 point playoff bonus point. I could see Denny Hamlin kind of almost playing for that 1 point. And yeah, I know it's crazy, 1 point, but we've seen when it gets down to the cutoff line in the playoffs, that 1 point could be the advantage of making the next round, making the final four, and those types of things. So these drivers are very aware of it, and if they can find a way to get a fast lap, they'll go after it. And I suspect that Denny Hamlin potentially goes after that Xfinity fastest lap, starting in 37th. Austin Cindric, who I think led the most laps at Daytona last week, $9,000, who has also led a ton of laps here at Atlanta in the new configuration. And if we look at his stats line, in the last 5 races, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, all 5 races in the top 20 with an 8th place average finish. He finished 10th here in the fall race last year. Doesn't have a win here, but there is a potential with Austin Cindric. I mean, my guess is Ryan Blaney's going to get out front early, and Austin Cindric is going to fall in line and push. That's just my personal opinion on how I think this plays out. I think the 4 Penske cars tried to all line up together. So I think at the beginning of the race, I think Ryan Blaney jumps out, gets in front of Austin Cindric, and Joey Logano either fits in right behind the 21 car of Josh Berry, or Josh Berry falls right behind Joey Logano. And the 4 of those cars run the high side, and they will just flat out try to leave everybody, and Ryan Blaney will end up leading a ton of laps. That's just how I think this plays out in the first stage. After that, everybody's going to pit, and then can you hold on to your position? Good question. Kyle Busch, our truck winner from earlier this afternoon, also the truck winner from last year, is starting in 6th. He's actually got pretty good stats here. I mean, as we see, he's got an average finish of 9th in the Next Gen era, which is probably one of his better tracks in the Next Gen era. 2 top 5s, 5 top 20s, so all 5 races he's finished in the top 20, finished 7th in the fall race last year. He does have 2 wins, but those were prior to the reconfiguration, and he's got a 10.4 average finish. I mean, a little stat also, when Kyle Busch wins one of the 2 Saturday races and then runs on Sunday, he typically runs better. So, do I think Kyle Busch is going to go out and win this? It's going to be a tough hill to climb, but he typically does really well at Atlanta. So, I'm probably going to run Kyle Busch like I run Brad Keselowski. It's probably going to be somewhere between 4 and 6 mile lineups. It'll be just a smidge here and there. I'm not going to go deep on Kyle Busch, but I won't also fade him either. Chris Buescher at 8,600. This is not his best track by any means. 25.6 average finish over the last 5 races, with only 1 top 10 and 2 top 20s, and finished 36th here in the fall. Some drivers just... and Chris Buescher's a pretty good Super Speedway racer. He just doesn't tend to do well here at Atlanta. Not that he can't tomorrow, but the trend line is not in his favor. So he does rank 24th in my ranking systems. I may have him in 2 lineups, and it'll probably be a RFK type of lineup where it'll be Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher, and Ryan Preece, along with probably another Ford, 1 Toyota, 1 Chevy. And that'll be 2 of the lineups that I build, and those are the 2 that Chris Buescher would fall into. Kyle Larson, my guy. I thought Daytona and Talladega were your worst tracks. Oh boy, not so much. $8,500, starting in 17th. 1 top 20 in the last 5 races here at Atlanta. It has been a rough go for Kyle Larson at Atlanta. He's got a negative average of 8.2 minus on DraftKings average. An average finish of 29.8. That we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. That may be one of the worst average finishes we see out of all the drivers. He finished 37th here in the fall race last year. 14 total starts, and even with the old configuration, only 2 top 5s. So the new configuration has definitely not been kind to Kyle Larson. I will probably run him in 2 to 4 lineups because he does have some place differential upside other than Chris Buescher. Not that Chris doesn't have a little bit, but Kyle Larson's got a little bit more. And he does come in ranked 5th, even with all this negative that's going into that algorithm because of where he's starting. Bubba Wallace, next in line here at 8,300. This is probably Bubba Wallace's worst of the 3 tracks. He does really well at Talladega and decent at Daytona. Not so much at the new configuration of Atlanta. Last 5 races, he's got a 20th place average finish. Finished 29th in the fall race last year. 1 top 5, 1 top 10, 2 top 20s. So not great, not awful. And he's one of the better qualifying Toyotas. So he's going to be kind of up in no man's land with a bunch of Fords. Now, I mean, I think they'll play fair, but you know, if they can leave him out to dry, they will. Another Toyota here out of the Joe Gibbs stable, Christopher Bell, 8,200, who actually runs this track decently, a 16.6 average finish. Remember, we still haven't seen a 29.8 average finish yet. Worse. Christopher Bell did finish 4th in the fall race last year. 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s out of those last 5 races. So not awful. And starting in 32nd, huge amount of place differential potential here. Same as Denny Hamlin. 37th and 32nd, both coming out of the Joe Gibbs stables. Will the Joe Gibbs guys all team up together and work together? Probably. But as Denny, Christopher Bell is going to be very highly owned. So keep that in mind. Taking these Toyotas is going to be not contrarian. It's going to be, you're going to be in a, I think Christopher Bell probably is in the 35 to 40% ownership range, where I think Denny could be in upwards of 50 plus. So just keep that in mind. Daniel Suarez, our winner of the spring race at Atlanta last year, where they finished 3 wide. I can't remember what it was, 0.0 or like 3/1000ths of a second separating first through third, and Daniel Suarez came out ahead. So, and then he backed that up with a second place finish in the fall race last year. So he finished 1st and 2nd at both of the races here at Atlanta last year. Can he repeat that? I mean, he's got an 8th place average finish over the last 5 races here, so it's not completely fluky. And starting in 29th, that's quite a bit of place differential. He's also got his partner Ross Chastain and a bunch of other Chevys that they will work with back there. So can Daniel work his way to the front? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think because of where he's starting, he's going to be pretty heavily owned. I mean, we're going to hear a lot about these place differentials. Daniel's got it. What's up, Fish? Everybody congratulate Mark Fish on his Daytona win in iRacing last Sunday. Can Mark Fish pull off the back-to-back win and win tomorrow night at Atlanta in our iRacing league? Maybe. We'll see. Yeah, you're welcome, Fish. Congratulations on your win. Too bad we can't play Draftkings on that. I would have taken you. But either way, Daniel Suarez finished in 2nd and 1st last year. I think he definitely has a great opportunity to finish in the top 5 again. But he's going to be pretty heavily owned, so definitely keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. Alex Bowman, one of the higher starting Chevys at $8,000, starting in 13th. Just kind of like most of the other Chevys, not great average finishes for the 5 races that we're comparing to. 1 top 5, 2 top 20s. He did finish 5th here in the fall race last year. So, not super great, and I'm not sure why the rest of this didn't come out, but either way. I don't mind some Alex Bowman. I think he might be starting a little too far up than what I'd like. I'd rather take a Chase Elliott starting in, 19th, over an Alex Bowman starting in 13th. Now, Chase Elliott's a little more expensive, but I'm not sure we're going to be too worried about salary caps. Everybody's priced really, really inexpensively this week. Chase Briscoe coming out of the Joe Gibbs car. This is one of the better qualifying Joe Gibbs cars, and that's 25th. So that's not saying a whole lot at $7,900. He was our pole center last year, and then Wednesday came and the penalties came, and Chase Briscoe and the team got penalized 100 driver points and team points. So currently Chase Briscoe is sitting at negative 67 points for the year. That's the equivalent of 2 more races. So literally 100 point drop off is the equivalent of the average of probably 3 races that they find at Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe, literally the second race of the year, is already almost in a must-win situation to make the playoffs. That's a huge, huge penalty. I know that they have appealed it. They'll hear the appeal, I think, next week at some point. But yeah, that one was huge. Starting in 25th, I mean, I'll have some Chase Briscoe with, some of the Toyota lineups that I run, but I'm also not going to go super heavy with them, because all it takes is one weird accident, one blown tire, mid-pack on lap 30 of this race, and they clean out the Toyotas, and it doesn't matter where you finish at that point, because you're all finishing in the 30s. So, I mean, I'll have some Chase Briscoe, but not a ton, even with the starting position of 25th. Like I said, I'll probably run 4 to 6, so just under 10% of ownership for Chase Briscoe. Tyler Reddick at $7,800, another Toyota out of the 2311 stable. So 2311 did end up qualifying a little bit better than the Joe Gibbs cars. They're both kind of all set up with the same kind of rule of thumb, but the 2311 cars did qualify a little bit better, which also is a little bit less in place differential if he's able to get any, because his average finish is 19.4 at Atlanta. He did finish 6th in the fall race last year, so there's an upside. I'll have some ownership, but I think I'm probably going to go a lot more with the Penske cars, and they'll be pretty spread out across my lineups, and then we'll have the Toyotas, and I'll also have the Chase Elliott's and those types of things. So my lineups are going to be very, very spread out for tomorrow, and I think that may be the case. I think the more novice players that are playing DraftKings are probably that kind of understand the place differential, and they're going to hear from every talking head out there, oh, it's all place differential. It's just like Daytona and Talladega. It's going to be place differential. But that's not truly the case here for Atlanta. For the most part it is, but I don't think you don't want to completely sleep on the Penske cars starting up front. No, you don't want to run a lot of them. You run one in each lineup or something along those lines. Kind of spread it out. Ross Chastain with a 14th place average finish starting in 33rd. I mean, this is somebody who could potentially get overlooked, especially since Daniel Suarez has run this track really, really well. That typically means Trackhouse is bringing a fast car. So I like probably some Ross Chastain, and I think he may get overlooked with the likes of Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, and those. Now, he's not going to be completely overlooked, so don't think we're finding a needle in the haystack here. But he could be one of the ones that's a little bit less owned. When I say a little less owned, he could be 22 to 25% owned, where I think Denny could be easily in the 50%. Christopher Bell could easily be in the 30 to 40% range. Ross could come in the 25 to 30% range. I mean, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., another one, averages a 15.6 average finish. Typically is a pretty good super speedway racer and runs decently well at Atlanta. Doesn't have a top 5, but has 2 top 10s in the last 5 races here, and he finished 14th here in the fall race last year. Starting in 34th. So, I mean, you could easily team up a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and a Ross Chastain as kind of a pivot from the Joe Gibbs cars and kind of run your lineups with those, with maybe a Ryan Blaney or a Joey Logano out of the Penske camp or an Austin Cindric. So I don't love the Josh Berry play starting up there with the Penske cars. And it's not that Josh Berry's bad at this track. He's just not. He's still not truly a Penske car. I mean, I think he could easily have a good race, but I don't know if he gets out and has dominated laps. I think he is the third or fourth wheel out of that group, and he's probably going to be relegated to third or fourth in line. So, Ryan Preece at 7,300, starting in 11th. He just missed the cutoff to the top 10 with the RFK cars, but most of the RFK cars are right there with him. So I easily see a Ryan Preece. Oh, yeah, and by the way, I'm so glad that Ryan Preece is okay, and hopefully on a Super Speedway, Ryan Preece can keep all four wheels on the ground. None of his doing. He's just wrong place, wrong time, but that poor guy has flipped more times than he needs to. So Ryan Preece's car needs to stay on the ground. That's all we could say. 21.5 average finish. I remember that was with the Stewart-Haas cars. So I don't take a whole lot of credence into Ryan Preece's average finishes. Different team, different car, same manufacturer. But either way, I don't know. Like I said, if I run an RFK lineup with all RFK cars, then Ryan Preece is going to get put into that. I could see that between being like 2 to 4 lineups that I have that. I mean, you're also talking about starting 3 cars all in the top 11. It's like, I don't think I'll have a full Penske lineup. I think I'll run Ryan Blaney in a lineup. I'll run him in more than one lineup, but I'll run him in one lineup with a lot of place differential, thinking that, okay, Ryan Blaney's going to go out and lead 120 laps. He's going to finish third, have some fast laps, and still have a really good points day for Draftkings, along with a Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell and Ricky Stenhouse and those. So, Ty Gibbs, another Joe Gibbs car, starting in 36. They just missed the setup completely. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but all of the Joe Gibbs cars are in the 30s. We're going to see more lineups tomorrow that are all Joe Gibbs cars than we see anything else. Plain and simple. It's because this is a place differential style track. It is a draft dependent track. The Toyotas are going to stick together. The Joe Gibbs guys are going to stick together. I could easily see them running a 4-car tandem in the back, 3 to 4 seconds off of the pace. That way, if a big wreck happens, they all slow up and they all survive. So, yeah, will I have a couple of Joe Gibbs all lineups? Yeah. Do I expect to be very, very be in the same ballpark with everybody? Yep. But it's kind of one of those, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I also don't mind being contrarian with some of my lineups too. So it's good. It's actually going to be a pretty tough lineup construction because there's going to be a ton of similarity. Michael McDowell at $7,100, starting in 24th. 14th place average finish here at Atlanta. He's got 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s. Finished 22nd in the fall race last year. Michael McDowell's pretty good at Super Speedways. He actually had a pretty good truck race today. Nobody was going to beat Kyle Busch. Well, they almost did. It was literally a bumper length at the finish. But Michael McDowell ended up having a decent day. I can't remember exactly where he finished. I think he finished somewhere in the top 5 or top 10. So he's got some laps. He's a little bit more familiar than some of the other drivers might be with Atlanta, even though we've raced there enough. They all know what they're getting into. They all go and race iRacing. Todd Gillen out of the front row Ford camp, starting in 5th. I'm telling you, the Fords were just fast. And they have been. Their Super Speedway package is better than the Chevys and the Toyotas. Now, what does that equate to a win? No, not necessarily. I mean, we looked at Daytona, and a Chevy won that. Now, Denny Hamlin almost won it, but there was a Chevy, there was a Toyota, and there was a Ford, all battling on coming out of the last corner. So it will even itself out as the race progresses tomorrow. Now, the Penske's could easily go 1, 2, 3 tomorrow, but who finishes 4th through 10th? That's a different ball game. And could Todd Gillen get up and play with the Penske's? They have much more of an alliance, I think, with RFK than they do with the Penske cars. AJ Allmendinger at 6,900. I think he's the second highest Chevy qualifying. And, I mean, if we look at his average finishes now, I know the sample size is kind of small, but it's a 9.5. And 2 starts. Both starts he's finished in the top 20. AJ's also very risk tolerant. He has no problem putting his car in some spots that he probably shouldn't, and most of the time it doesn't work, and sometimes it does. And starting in 12th, I will probably be, if not a full fade, it'll probably be a full fade for me with AJ Allmendinger. If I get burned by it, I get burned by it, but I don't see AJ making it to the end, to be perfectly honest. Eric Jones, who ended up having a pretty good Daytona 500 after a really good qualifying run. I think he still ended up in the top 10. $6,800 starting in 28th. We've got some place differential here. And this could be somebody that will probably get overlooked. So this could be an easy, sneaky pick. Is maybe going with the legacy guys between Eric Jones and John Hunter. John Hunter ended up in the top 5 at Daytona last week. That was our sneaky pick of the week. I think Eric Jones could be the sneaky pick of the week at a 14.8 average finish. 3 of the last 5, he's finished in the top 20. So I kind of like the thought process of maybe going after an Eric Jones because he's going to get overlooked. Justin Haley starting in 21st. This is another one that could be, you could easily see, if you're trying to be pretty contrarian and kind of sneaky, you could go with a Justin Haley and an Eric Jones. Now, one drives a Chevy, one drives a Toyota, but we also saw all 3 manufacturers right there battling at the end at Daytona. So, I mean, it's kind of every driver for themselves at the very, very end of this thing. But starting in 21st, there's some place differential here. He's got a 13.8 average finish. We don't necessarily need him to go win. What does our little chart say here? Start in 21st. And let's say he just gets up to 10th and has 8 fast laps. It's a 48.5. That's not quite where we want to be for optimal lineup. We want to get just north of 52 points, but that's getting real, real close. I mean, if he can just bump it up to 8th, now we're there. So 2 spots difference if he can just go get an 8th place finish. So I don't mind a Justin Haley play. Josh Berry, I honestly just think he's starting too far up for my liking. He's got a 25th place average finish. I mean, that was with Stewart-Haas Racing, which is no longer in existence. And we've already seen some of the other drivers from Stewart-Haas, like Ryan Preece, who had about the same average finish. Once again, we still haven't seen anybody with a worse average finish than Kyle Larson at a 29.8. So we'll see if that pops up before the end of this video. But I just... The Penske guys will help Josh Berry, but not to their own detriment. So I think Josh Berry is, if it's all Penske up front, Josh Berry's going to be 4th. So Austin Dillon starting in 15th. I think Austin Dillon may be just starting a little too far up. And I don't think it's very sneaky because his average finish here is 23.6. Only 2 top 20s, no top 10s. So I think it's too risky with an Austin Dillon play. And he's not going to get a whole lot of help from Kyle Busch, because even in qualifying, Kyle Busch was like, oh, I'm the lone Chevy driver with a bunch of Fords. I'm used to being by myself and doing my thing. like no recollection that he does have a teammate in the race with him. Noah Gragson at 6,300, starting in 10th. Good for Noah Gragson. Ooh, we have a 29.8 average finish. I think we're tied. I think we've got 2 cars that have 5 races with a 29.8 average finish. The difference between Kyle Larson is starting 17th and Noah Gragson starting in 10th. And not that I'm going to run much of Noah. Yeah, I just don't think I'm gonna go that route. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave Noah alone. He does come in ranked 36, so don't have a whole lot of interest in Noah Gragson. I would like to see him do well, but I'm not sure that unless something happens to the Penske's, I just don't think he's got much of a chance. Corey LaJoie, 6,200, starting in 35th. Corey LaJoie almost won this race. Was it the fall of 22 when Chase Elliott ended up beating Corey LaJoie in the last 3 laps? But Corey LaJoie had been up there and was running up there. Now, his qualifying spot's not great, but this could be another sneaky pick because people are going to potentially overlook Corey LaJoie for the Denny Hamlins and Christopher Bells and those types of guys. So, I mean, you could run a real sneaky pick and real contrarian and go Corey LaJoie, Eric Jones. There was somebody else. Eric Jones, Corey LaJoie, Haley in 21st. Yeah, you could run those and have a pretty good, very contrarian type of lineup. Same thing with Cole Custer here. 20.5 average finish starting in 23rd. You could easily interswap Cole Custer and Justin Haley. The difference between Cole Custer is going to be driving a Ford. Now, he's the only Ford out of the Haas camp that's left, but he could easily get overlooked. He could be kind of sneaky also. Riley Herbst in the 2311 Toyota number 35 Monster Energy car. We don't have any stats on him for this race, so that's going to be the thing about Riley Herbst. We're not going to have a whole lot of stats all year on Riley other than going back and looking at his Xfinity stuff. And I did not do that for this race. Starting in 27th, he's probably going to get overlooked if you're looking for somebody out of the Toyota camp that's starting kind of towards the back that could easily just be overlooked. I mean, he could finish in Daytona last week, but Riley Herbst could easily be overlooked starting in 27th. A decent amount of place differential. Ty Dillon starting in 20th. He's not starting far enough back, and he's didn't qualify that well. Andrew just got on. May have talked about it, but how do you get different with so many good plays? Yeah, we have been kind of talking about it. It's kind of the sneaky plays and sneaky picks. And I think what we're kind of looking at, what I'm kind of thinking about is like an Eric Jones is going to get overlooked. A Riley Herbst could easily get overlooked. Corey LaJoie will probably definitely get overlooked starting in 35th. Because you've got 37th Denny Hamlin. You've got 36th Ty Gibbs. You've got a 32nd Christopher Bell. All those guys are going to be so heavily owned that a Corey LaJoie is going to still be probably 10 to 15% owned, maybe even 20%, but he's not going to be 50% like Denny Hamlin is. And then at the front row, I mean, a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, it's a super speedway. I'm not taking somebody that's starting in the top 10. Well, if you go back and watch the beginning of this video, I mean, the top 10 plays are absolutely there. Because if I look here, Joey Logano in 2023 started from the pole, finished first, and had 84 Draftkings points. Had 140 total laps led. Chase Elliott, same thing. Started in first, finished in first at 71.7 points because he had enough laps led. There is potential to have dominators here. Ryan Blaney started in 6th. Austin Cindric started in 8th in 2024, a year ago on this race. Austin Cindric, Joey Logano, both started in the top 10. Austin Cindric, in fact, even lost place differential and still made the optimal lineup because he was able to lead enough laps. And laps led don't pay a whole lot, but if you can lead enough of them and you can just stay in the top 10, it'll still play. So you don't want to run a lot of people that are starting in the top 10. It's one or two. It's hit or miss. But I think the Penske's, as we've seen, I mean, you go back and through this and look, and it's Joey Logano is in that one. Nobody in that one. Austin Cindric, Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, Austin Cindric. So the Penske guys are fast. As long as they can keep their stuff clean, they're going to finish in the top 10. The question is how many laps do they lead and how many fast laps do they might have. But Corey LaJoie easily could be a sneaky pick. So Riley Herbst could be an easy sneaky pick. Eric Jones starting in 28th could really be a sneaky pick because everybody else is going to gravitate to the Joe Gibbs cars. Carson Hocevar starting in 26th always tries to keep his nose clean at these super speedways. He had a 17.5 average finish. He finished 16th. I mean, is that going to be enough? I don't think so. What do we say? He's starting 26. So we go over here, 26, and let's say he finishes 12th, and he's got 10 fast laps. It's 49.75. Well, as we saw in our little top 15 Draftkings points, I mean, that definitely puts him in the top 15. And that puts him somewhere in the average of 8th. Now, that could be potentially enough to get you into the situation, but you're also talking about going from 26th to 8th. So, maybe. So, Carson Hocevar could be a little bit of a sneaky play. John Hunter might actually be starting a little too far up for me to really call it sneaky or a really decent play, but these are the ones that you could still run a John Hunter Nemechek with an Eric Jones, with a Corey LaJoie, with a Ryan Blaney, who leads 140 laps and finishes third. So you can make these very different than everybody else is going to run the Joe Gibbs and maybe one Penske. Shane Van Gisbergen, he's definitely going to get overlooked, but I think for good reason. I don't feel comfortable yet taking Shane with this car on a super speedway. He has not performed like he did in the Xfinity series on super speedways with the Xfinity car, with this next gen car. So you can be contrarian and play a Shane, but I don't love that play by any means. It's just this car just runs a little bit more different than the Xfinity car, and Shane had gotten used to the Xfinity car towards the end, and he was performing well at super speedways. I think by the end of this year, he could easily be doing the same thing with the next gen car, but I don't love the play for tomorrow. Zane Smith starting in 7th, starting too far up, and I don't think the front row guys have anything for the Penske's. Just like I don't think RFK's got anything for the Penske's. Now, they're all Fords. They're all probably going to play nice with each other until the end. The question is he there at the end? But I don't think Zane Smith goes out and leads a bunch of laps. I don't think he goes and has a bunch of fast laps. And that's what you're going to need if you're starting in the top 10. And I just don't think that's the case for Zane. Cody Ware, starting in 31st, could be a little bit of a sneaky play. Even though I think he's going to play it like he did at Daytona last week. He's going to drop to the rear. He's going to chill out until the end, hope for a bunch of carnage, and then get himself a decent place differential and a decent finish. It's a little tougher at Atlanta because it's not like Daytona. If you lose the draft at Daytona and you've got 2 or 3 other guys to kind of draft with, but you don't have the big draft, which is really where the speed comes from, you can run for 20 laps before you go a lap down. At Atlanta, because you're a mile shorter, if you lose the draft and you don't have a dancing partner, you're lapped within like 6 or 7 laps. It's very, very quick. Even with one dancing partner, it's not going to be enough. You need 4 or 5 cars to dance with. And unless Cody's got that, Cody could easily get himself into a pickle. Now he will probably have a BJ McLeod starting in 38th, who he probably could easily go partner with. They've danced together and drafted together plenty times in the past. They trust each other. But once again, I don't think 3 cars. So even if JJ Yeley joins that group, I don't like the JJ Yeley, BJ, or Cody Ware play. And I don't think it's a safe contrarian play off of the other guys. There's other guys to take with inside the mix that we talked about earlier. Now, could you run some Cody Ware? And will I run some Cody Ware? I might run 2 or 3 or 4 lineups, so 5% or less, but not 0. Where I don't think I'll have any JJ Yeley, and I really don't think I'll have any BJ. Because even starting 38th, if he goes and gets his 25th. So let's pull our handy dandy chart up. You guys will get tired of this soon, I'm sure. 38th. And let's say he just gets what he got in the fall of last year, which is 25th. And let's say, let's give him 5 fast laps. I mean, it's 33.5. Well, 33.5 doesn't make the top 15 in any of the races. And you're not going to cash in any lineup unless you've got almost all 6 of your drivers in the top 15 in points. So that's what I'm kind of saying. It just, even with them starting so far back, I just don't see it being a play for BJ or JJ Yeley. I just don't think they have the horsepower or the speed. They don't have the engineers. I just don't, unless there's just massive carnage. And I don't think that's going to be the case. We'll have some carnage, but I don't think we're going to have what we have at Daytona. It just hasn't shown that in the past. So, guys that I think will be probably heavily owned. A Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs. Now, the Ross Chastain might get overlooked more so than a Denny Hamlin or Ty Gibbs, but I think Ross will still be 35 to 40% owned. So I think he's still going to be pretty heavily owned. I think a Chase Elliott could easily get overlooked. Other than he's the most popular driver, he'll get some pull from that. But a Daniel Suarez could easily get overlooked, even though he won this race a year ago and he finished second in the fall. I think Eric Jones with a Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and a Corey LaJoie, I think that's a really good sneaky play. You could run Michael McDowell with that group, maybe even Riley Herbst. I don't know if I love the Cole Custer because he just doesn't have a whole lot of dancing partners. And then you could run a Carson Hocevar in there. Carson Hocevar is going to take care of his stuff. He's going to try to be there at the end. I would not run much more than one of these drivers in the start up front, finish up front group. And it's realistically, I'm looking at probably a Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney, or Austin Cindric really to be out of this groups. Maybe a couple of Kyle Bushes. So, but like a Shane Van Gisbergen, Tyler Reddick, Todd Gillen, John Hunter Nemechek, Ryan Preece, Noah Gregson, Austin Dillon, Josh Berry, and Zane Smith. I don't have much interest. I'll probably be running little to no ownerships, probably no ownerships of the guys that are down here. So most of my ownership is going to come from this grouping up here, and I'll mix and match. So hopefully that helps you out, Andrew. Glad you made it in for tonight's discussion. Yep, we're just a little over an hour. If anybody's got any questions, thoughts, or concerns, make sure you hit me up in the chat. If not, we're going to call it a little bit early tonight. We were able to get through everything pretty quickly. No real drama. But it's going to be difficult to run. We're going to see a ton of the same lineups. The thing is, and you're going to have to play a little bit risky, but in tournaments, that's what you have to do. The Joe Gibbs cars are going to be extremely heavily owned. I don't recommend running any more than one of the guys starting up front. Let's see, where did that go? Yeah, because I mean, if we look here, like I said, the green highlight is people that started on the front row. Here's one with Brad starting in fourth. So there's two. There's two in this group. There's two in this group. And there's two in this group. So I mean, the last four? Well, I guess 2022, but 3 of the last 4 races have had at least 2 drivers that have started in the top 10. Now, we can go back and look, and they also had a fair amount of laps led, and they were able to finish in the top 10. Andrew says, 20 max, do you play more of a cash game? No, I do not. I will play most of my lineups will be... I mean, the thing is with a cash, it's so difficult to run a cash lineup at a super speedway because there's too many variables. The cash lineups become much, much easier to configure at a road course or a typical intermediate 1.5 or mile track. It's a little more difficult. I mean, you can do them pretty easily on the short tracks. These super speedways are just so random that it's really tough to run a cash play. I mean, if you're going to run a cash play, it ends up running very similar. I mean, if I were to run a cash lineup, I'm going to run a Denny Hamlin. I'm going to run. Where's my sheet? Here. I'm going to run a Christopher Bell, a Denny Hamlin, a Ross Chastain, I don't think I'd run a Chase Briscoe. He's starting a little bit further up than I want. So a Ross, a Denny, probably a Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Eric Jones. Even Eric Jones may be a little sneaky for a cash play. You're looking for something that's going to be a little bit more sure. A Corey LaJoie would be okay. Don't love it. And then I would run a Ryan Blaney, or I would run an Austin Cindric, or I would run a Joey Logano. So I'd run like five of these guys and one of these guys. But that's probably what I'm going to do for tournament lineups. So I don't typically play cash because there's also a little bit more randomness there's definitely a lot more randomness to super speedways. But there's a little bit more randomness to when it comes to playing cash when it comes to NASCAR. Until you get to the 1.5 cookie cutter, we know week in and week out what we're going to get, and every once in a while you get screwed because somebody blows a tire or has a bad pit stop. But typically, I can already tell you, I'm probably going to be 45 to 50% owned on Kyle Larson when we go to Las Vegas. And I'm probably going to do that whether that's a tournament, like a GPP tournament, or a cash tournament. So there's not a ton of difference when we get to cash lineups and tournament lineups, GPP lineups, and NASCAR. There's only a few tracks where it really you can start to separate a cash lineup and a tournament lineup. Hopefully that helps. But I do mostly 20 max. I typically do the Chrome Horn. I do the $1 one. I do the quarter one. And then depending on what my cash flow looks like on whether I do one of the $5 one. But that's usually 150 max that I just run 20 in. But typically it's those 3, and then I'll run 80 lineups in the 150 50 cent tournament. So those are the tournaments that I typically will run, and then I'll run 3 of what I consider to be my best lineups, which would probably end up being cash lineups, but I'll run those in the triple max or the single tournaments. So that's typically where you can find most of where I play at. But very rarely am I doing the 50-50s or double ups or the cash style tournaments. Even though I probably should, because most of my lineups end up typically doing pretty well. And it's tough to win a tournament. It's tough. It's kind of like sitting down and if you're familiar with casinos and table games, I can easily go sit down, play a cash game, which would be blackjack. You can play blackjack. You win 1, you lose 2, you win 3, and it's just this back and forth. And probably at the end of the day, you're going to be, if you go in with 100, you could leave with 120, or you might be down. Typically, once you finally lose it all, you just quit. But you're never going to get rich playing blackjack unless you're playing progressive blackjack, which is you just keep betting $5 or you double up every time, almost regardless. And that's when all of a sudden the stakes get really, really high, but it's still a cash play. But your 3-card poker, your Mississippi stud, your let it rides, and those are your tournament plays. And those have huge high stake odds. They're really tough to get, but when you get them, it's big. So that's the difference between playing a cash lineup. Go play, if you're playing cash, you're going to go sit down and play blackjack. And you're going to win, let's say you run 20 different cash lineups, you're probably going to win 12 out of the 20. Well, if you bet $100, you're going to probably walk away with $120. Well, it's $20 what you're trying to do? Maybe. Whereas you could run those 20, but if you hit somewhere in the top 10 of the Chrome Horn, you're going to take your $4 bet and make 100, 200, 10,000. So it's risk and reward. If you risk a lot, you can win a lot. If you don't risk a lot, you're not going to win as much, but you can probably long play it. That's kind of what I'm saying. So I don't know. I've just always been kind of more the gambler, and I'll go after the bigger stake. Is it smart? I don't know. Sometimes. I've won $10,000 before, so I guess at times it is, and at times I've had days where literally I'll go a couple $100 in on Draftkings, and at the end of the day, win $20. So it's a tough one, but I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun with it. It keeps me very involved throughout all of NASCAR. And that's kind of where I've lived for many, many years. And I enjoy it. And if I do something I enjoy, if it costs me some money sometimes, that's okay. Heck, I used to love playing golf. Well, golf, no chance of winning any money out of it because you're not playing tournaments because I'm not good enough. But you could easily go play $120 for a round of golf. It takes me about 4 to 5 hours, not including beers and golf balls and everything else. Well, I could play $120 in DraftKings, watch the race. So it's a hobby, and if I happen to hit on it, I hit on it. If I don't, it's okay. I got to watch a race. So that's kind of my take on it. But either way, if anybody's got any thoughts, questions, whatever, we're an hour 20 in, which is about normal. So I'm going to cut it off here. Every Saturday night, pending on lots of different factors. There will be races this year that I will have to do remotely, that I will have to reschedule. It'll be a quick 20, 30-minute deal when I go to Martinsville twice. I will do quick synopsis runs to Typically, if I go to Martinsville, typically on Thursday/Friday, I will give a detailed breakdown. So that way, when it comes to Saturday night or Sunday morning before the race, I can do a 20-minute live, hammer it out, and go. Because I go to the races. And then there's typically 1 or 2 weekends where I know we've got another baseball tournament in Florida this year where I'll be in Florida for most of 4th of July weekend. So I did my live last year in Florida. But the schedules may shift a little bit. Like the Coke 600 runs on Sunday night. Well, I will, instead of Saturday night, I'll do a Sunday noon for the Coca-Cola 600. Typically right before the start of the Indianapolis 500. So most of the time, Saturday night, 9 o'clock, unless the Xfinity race lasts a little bit longer. And then what I would do is just as soon as the Xfinity race was over, I'll go live. So most Saturday nights, 9 o'clock, I'll be here. So tune in then. I appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We will see you next week. And if you happen to win, shoot me a message. I'd love to hear about it. Good luck. Bye.
Get a good deep breath. Get ready to roll here. Only about one thing tonight, getting the W, so got to be around at the end to do that. Get ready to roll tonight, boys. Let's go have some fun.
Don't get me any more fired up than I already am.
All the way to the checkered. You're fine. Nobody's got to run. Checker time, baby!
Hell yeah!
Proud of you there, Matt. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day. Great work, my man. Great work.
Keep putting yourself in position, we'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
Great job, guys. Excellent work, my man. Excellent work. Thank you.
Man, that's awesome. Set out with a goal and got it here, bud. Thank you very much.
Really proud of you, man. Drove your butt off tonight. We had the fastest car here, bud.
Probably killed our deal there. Just feel like I gave one away. Yeah, boys. Way to rebound. Great job.
Great job, bud. Really good job. Appreciate you hanging in there with us all weekend.
What a weekend. Good job. Thank you.